Hello and welcome to Deck Building 101. I am your instructor, Eric Smith, and I'm here to talk about the general rules of deck building games. The purpose of this video is twofold, maybe one and a half fold. First of all, it's, as I said, just a general overview of what deck building games are. For people who aren't necessarily familiar with this style of game, you can learn a little bit about it, and maybe you'll want to pick one up and try it. But the main reason I'm making this video is I do a lot of reviews on my YouTube channel. It's mainly books, some movies, but also games. And as a huge fan of deck building games, I tend to review deck building games a lot and their expansions. And I find that every time I record one of those reviews, I have to go over how to play the game, and it becomes a little tedious. So I figured I'd make this video, which will give you that general overview, and I can just link to this, so when I record new reviews I don't have to go over the same things. I can just link to this and people can check it out and see how to play a deck building game in general. I'm not an expert in deck building games by any means. There are plenty that I have not played. So again, this is just an overview. There's so many differences, I'm not going to be able to get into everything. There will be two sections here. First, I'm just going to go over the basic rules of how to play. And it's the thing that most, if not all, deck building games have in common. Then in the second section, I'll talk a little bit more specifically about some of the differences in the different games. For the first part, I'm going to use the DC deck building game. I think this is one of the simplest deck building games. It's definitely the simplest that I've played, and it's one of my favorites. So that's what I'm going to use to go over the general rules. And first of all, a deck building game is not a collectible card game. Once you have this base set, that's all you need to play. You're not going to have to go out and find booster packs and try to build your own personal deck. Everything is in here for everybody to play. You're all working from the same set of cards. As I said, there are expansions, but again, they simply go into the main game. Everybody has access. Does that make sense? So, the very basic rules. At its most basic, with a deck building game, every player starts with the same weak deck of cards. You use those to purchase more powerful cards that you then use to try to achieve whatever the end goal of the game is. So, with DC deck building, every single player is going to start with the same 10 cards. You're going to have 7 punch cards and 3 vulnerability cards. That's what everybody has. Then you're going to have a pool of cards that are available to purchase. These are more powerful cards. You use the weak cards to gain the more powerful cards. They get added to your personal deck. And again, you use these cards to achieve whatever the end goal is. In the case of DC deck building, aside from the pool of cards, there's a stack of supervillain cards. Once all of the supervillains have been defeated, the game ends. You add up your victory points. Whoever has the most points wins. So, with these cards, you have the cost of the cards. Since these are your starter cards, there is no cost. Everybody has these. Over here, I'm going to drop the cards. Over here are your victory points. Again, the starter cards have no victory points. And then up here, see that +1 power? That's your currency for purchasing other cards. Now, I'm just going to grab a card off of the top of the deck here. You can see it has a cost of 2 in the silver circle there. 1 victory point at the end of the game. And it has some special text. That's what the card's going to allow you to do. So, at the beginning of the game, I'm going first. I've shuffled up my deck. and I've drawn 5 cards. So let's see. Okay, so I have 5 cards in my hand. I have my 5 cards. This is my hand. What you do is you play your cards, which essentially means you just set them down on the table and do whatever they say if they have more instructions than just generating power. In this case, my hand is 5 punches. So I'm going to lay them down one at a time. +1 power. 2, 3, 4, 5. I know you can't see me laying them down, but it's 5 of these. Each one generates 1 power. So I have 5 power. Now I look at the pool of available cards, and let's say it's Catwoman, costs 2. Clayface costs 4. The Riddler costs 3. Penguin costs 3. And Solomon Grundy costs 6. I have 5 points of power. So right off the bat, I can't purchase Solomon Grundy. I don't have enough. I could purchase Clayface. That would leave me with 1 power. There's nothing here that costs 1, so Clayface is the only card that I could buy. Or I could buy Catwoman, which costs 2. That leaves me with 3. I'm going to pick up the Riddler as well. Did you follow that? I have 5 points of currency. I can purchase up to 5 cost worth of cards. When you purchase a card, it goes in your discard pile. At the end of your turn, you pick up the cards you played, they go in your discard pile, and you draw your next 5 cards. When you need to draw a card or reveal a card and you have no cards in your deck, that's when you will shuffle your discard pile, flip it face down, and now that's your deck. You don't do it as soon as you're out of cards in your deck. You only do it when you need a card from your deck and there are none available. Then you'll shuffle your discard pile. So that's the basics. You generate currency, you buy more powerful cards, you use those to achieve your end goal. So in DC deck building, let's see. Let's say I purchased Heat Vision. Once I play it, it's going to generate 3 power, and it says you may destroy a card in your hand or discard pile. You want to destroy these weak cards, get them out of your deck. That way you're going to get to your more powerful cards that much more quickly. In DC deck building, there are also weakness cards, which are completely worthless as far as gameplay goes, and they're -1 victory point at the end of the game, so you want to get rid of those. Let's see. You have things like Mira. There you go. And it says, if your discard pile is empty, +4 power, otherwise +2 power. So, again, generates that power for buying other cards. What is this one called? Super Speed. Draw a card. Simple enough. But it also has a defense. I'm not going to get into that. That's getting way too specific. But the cards, they generate power. They allow you to do other things that are going to help you win the game, hopefully. And in this particular game, there are a bunch of different types of cards. There's heroes, villains, superpowers, equipment, locations. And you're just going to buy these cards, build your deck, get it, and try to win the game. And I think that's as basic as you can get. That's the general gameplay in any deck building game. You start with a weak deck. Everybody starts with the same weak deck. You purchase more powerful cards. You try to win the game. Excuse me. So, anybody have any questions? Let me know. That's the general stuff. Now, there are, to me, 3 major differences in all of the deck building games that I have. Again, I don't have them all. I haven't played them all, so there may be others that I'm missing. But I'm going to go over the three general, major, what I would consider the major differences. First of all, it's the pool of cards that are available to purchase. You have one of the most popular deck building games is Thunderstone, and it's a fantasy-based game. And in Thunderstone, see if you can see this. What you have is a set pool of cards. Once you set up the game, these are the cards that are available to purchase, and that's it. Each one of these is a stack of the same card. So now in Thunderstone, it's sort of a role-playing-ish game. So there are different levels to some of the character cards. But like this spear here, that's a stack of, let's say, 10 spear cards. The torch over here, I think that's what that, or that's a flaming sword, I think. That's 10 of the same card. 10 of the same card, 10 of the same card. So that's what you have to purchase. Now, of course, there are all sorts of different cards. There's a randomizer, so every game is going to have a different pool, but that pool is set. Again, hopefully this makes sense. So there are a number of games that have that with a set pool. With DC Deck Building, where did I put... There we go. DC Deck Building and a number of other deck building games, you have what's generally called a lineup. You purchase from that lineup, and once you do, you refill that empty space with a new card. This is the deck of cards from DC Deck Building, and there's a great variety. There are 2 or 3 or even 4 copies, sometimes more for very specific cards, of each card, but there are dozens and dozens of different cards in here. So as opposed to Thunderstone, where you have, let's see, it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 cards. That's it. That's your variety. 13 cards that you're going to be able to purchase and add to your deck. With something like DC Deck Building, there are dozens and dozens of different cards. I like the lineup better because of that greater variety. You never know what's going to come out. And so there are a number of different card games, the collectible games, with the lineup. So that's the first major difference. The set pool of cards versus the lineup, the ever-changing lineup. I like the lineup better. The second major difference that I've noticed is your currency, as I'm calling it. In DC Deck Building, it's simply power. That's it. Everything you do is based on how much power you've generated. Excuse me. And there are a few deck building games with this single form of currency. But the majority of games that I've seen, and again, this is just my experience, have 2 forms of currency. So one of the other really popular games, and one that I like a lot, is Legendary, the Marvel deck building game. And there are 2 forms of currency in this game. If you look here, that star is your recruit currency. And then if you can see these slash marks, that is your fight or attack currency. So in Legendary, the Marvel deck building game, you have a lineup of heroes that you're going to recruit to build your deck, make it more powerful, but there's also a lineup of villains that you need to defeat. And so you use, obviously, the recruit points for recruiting new heroes, and the attack for fighting the villains. Another A pretty popular game is Ascension. I had a lid or a box for Ascension. I don't know where it went. But again, I don't know what they call it. I don't remember specifically. You have recruit points and you have attack points. In Ascension, you have a single lineup. Your heroes and your monsters are mixed. But you use your recruit to get the more powerful cards. Use your fight to defeat the monsters. So that's the second big difference. The type of currency that you have. Some games have a single type. Some games have multiple types. There's a game called Dark Gothic. It's a horror-based deck building game that has 3 types. It's basically colors. I think it's red, blue, and green. And there's a wild, but we don't need to get into that. So the cards that you're trying to either recruit or defeat will have, you might need 2 red, 3 blue, and 1 green to recruit or defeat that card. So triple currency in that one. Major difference number 2. The third difference I will get to as soon as I take a drink because I'm becoming a little parched. So I hope you'll excuse me. All right, getting a little dry mouth here. The third difference is that some deck building games give you a role to play. Going back to DC, pull these cards out here. You have, at the beginning of the game, everybody gets a superhero. You can do it randomly, which is how we do it, or if people can agree, you can pick your superhero if you like. But you get Superman, or Wonder Woman, or Batman, or The Flash, or Aquaman, or Green Lantern. And with DC, all these do is give each person a specific special ability. With Batman, +1 power for each equipment you play during your turn. Simple enough. Superman is basically the same. +1 power for each different superpower you play during your turn. The Flash, you go first, because he's the Flash. He's the fastest man alive. And then, the first time a card tells you to draw 1 or more cards during each of your turns, draw an additional card. Wonder Woman, for each villain you buy or gain during your turn, draw an extra card at the end of your turn. Excuse me. So, each player will have a specific role card, and it's going to give them something a little extra. In some of the other games, I have this one, Penny Arcade, the game, Rumble in Rillia, or however you pronounce that. It's Cthulhu themed. Each person is going to get a role card, and that role card may give you a special card for your weak basic deck. The same thing goes for Legendary Encounters and Legendary Predator, which are based on Alien and Predator, the movie franchises. They are legendary, so whoops. They're legendary games, so they're basically the same as this, but instead of Marvel characters, you're playing against xenomorphs or predators. But you get a role card, and depending on that role, you're going to get 1 special card that goes into your starter deck. So that's the third difference that I've seen. Some games give each player a special role, which will give them a special ability and may give them a single unique card that's going to be added to their deck. So those are the 3 major differences. I suppose one might consider this a major difference, but it's just sort of common sense, I think. each game has a different end goal, or a different way to end the game. With DC deck building, I believe I mentioned there's a stack of supervillain cards. Once those cards are gone, the game ends. You add up your victory points. Whoever has the most points wins. The other way to end the DC deck building game is if the main deck runs out. In Marvel, the Marvel deck building game, this is a cooperative game, and the game plays against the players. There's a mastermind, and he has tactics that he can use to hurt the players. There's a scheme that's going to hurt the players. The game ends either when the players defeat the mastermind, and then you add up your victory points, whoever has the most wins, or if the scheme comes to fruition. There are dozens of different schemes, so there are different ways that the game can end badly for the players. But the game ends, and then again, you can, if you want, even though you've lost, you can add up your victory points. I actually have a notebook. I keep track of all of the games we play, who wins, who loses. When we play Legendary, if all of the players have won, if the players win the game, everybody's name goes in the win column, and I put an asterisk next to the player who had the most points to indicate we all won, but this one person was the ultimate hero. And then whatever villain we were playing against goes in the lose column. And then vice versa. If we lose the game, the red skull goes in the win column, all our names go in the lose column, but there's still an asterisk for whoever had the most points. There's Nightfall, which is vampires and werewolves deck building game. It's one of those that has the set pool of cards. I think it's 9 cards. So you basically have 9 little mini decks of 10 or 12, 14 cards, however many it is. Everybody's buying from those 9 cards. But there's a wound stack. You generate wounds in other players, and then there's a specific number of wounds depending on how many players there are. Once that specific number of wounds is gone, the game ends. Whoever has the fewest wounds in their deck wins the game. So all sorts of different ways for the game to end. Star Realms, a very popular deck building game, very small, simple deck building game. This game, everybody has hit points, I suppose. I'm not sure if that's exactly what they call them. Again, it's been a while. But everybody starts with 50, and this is a last man standing deck building game. So you use your recruit points to get more powerful cards, add them to your deck. You use your attack points to attack the other players and try to knock them out of the game. Excuse me. Try to knock them out of the game. Once all their hit points are gone, they're out. Last man standing wins. You have Cthulhu Realms, which is basically Star Realms with a Cthulhu skin. I happen to like this better because I'm a huge Cthulhu fan. Instead of hit points, it's sanity points. You're trying to drive your opponents insane. Last person with a normal brain cell is the winner. I love this game. It's so much fun. And the artwork is a lot of fun. And upside down. This is another one with the lineup, so it's ever changing. You have a greater variety of cards to choose from. And there are different mechanics in Star Realms and Cthulhu Realms than in some of the other games. I'm not going to get into the real specifics of it. So the end goal in your games is typically different, although you're either to win, you either want the most victory points or to be the last player standing. So that's that. And as I said, all sorts of different themes for games. There's, pardon me, Star Trek, the original series. There's also the Next Generation. I happen to be a huge fan of the original series, so this is the version that I have. Again, the end goal is different. There are some different mechanics, but everybody starts with the same weak deck, recruit stronger cards, try to achieve whatever that end goal is. I already showed you Nightfall. I found, here's Ascension, one of the Ascension games. Lots of different versions of this game. I happen to like this one a lot. There is a set pool of crystals, depending on how many players will determine how many crystals there are. Once that, they're basically victory points for defeating monsters. Once those crystals have been depleted, everybody's that pool that everybody's going to take from as they get victory points. Once that's depleted, the game ends. Whoever has the most points wins. With Thunderstone, this one's interesting because there are basically two sections. You have the village, which is where you're going to recruit your stronger cards, and then you have the cave or the cavern or whatever it's called, where the monsters are. When you're playing, you have to decide before you lay your cards down whether you're going to the village or going to the cave to fight the monsters. There's one big bad monster. Once he's defeated or he escapes the cave, that's when the game ends. Again, add up your points. Person with the most points wins. Where did the other one go? There's a game called Paperback that I had. There it is. Paperback is a fun little game. It's a word deck building game. Your cards just have letters on them. And some other things, but basically they're letters. You're going to spell words. That's how you generate your recruit points. You buy other cards with letters on them that are more powerful. And they have some special powers as well. It might say, if this is the last letter in your word, get an extra point. If it's the first letter in your word, get an extra point. It'll do different things. And then there are these really nice sort of paperback cover looking cards that have higher victory points on them. Those are the ones you want to get. Once a certain number of those cards are gone, the game ends. Whoever has the most points wins. And these actually also have what I'll call roll cards, which give you, each player can have a different roll card, which gives them a special ability. This game's a lot of fun, especially if you like word games. So that's it. That's some of the variations of deck building games. As I said, there are so many. There are so many that I haven't played, that there's tons of stuff I haven't covered. Pardon me again. It's really dry in here, and this is the second or third time I've tried to record this video, so I'm really getting, parched, as it were. All right, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. The very, very basics for those who aren't familiar, and then some of the differences in some of the games. So hopefully this has been a little helpful, and I can just link to this when I review something, and I don't have to go over all of this every time I review a deck building game or a deck building game expansion. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or corrections, please put them in the comments below. I can't answer everything. I don't know everything, obviously. BoardGameGeek.com is a great resource. That's what I go to when I have questions. I think typically every expansion that I get, I'm going to have questions about how certain cards are played. So I go to Board Game Geek, and they'll have their forums will have questions. I can't always find answers because I guess not everybody has the same questions that I do. I haven't posted any questions yet. I usually just look to see if somebody else has asked it. But you can post your questions if you can't find an answer. So that's a great resource. But feel free to ask me anything in the comments below. If I made any mistakes, please correct me in the comments below. If you just want to talk about deck building games, comment in the comments below. As I said, I love deck building games. I've kind of gone a little nuts. I have every DC deck building base set, of which there are 4 at this point. I have every expansion for DC deck building. The same with the Legendary Marvel. I have all of the Legendary base sets. I have all of the expansions. I only have the 1 Thunderstone. I have 2 Ascensions. So, yeah, love deck building games. And I just, the whole reason I started a YouTube channel and started doing reviews was to share the things that I like. It's sort of expanded beyond that, and I'm reviewing things that I don't necessarily like, but I think I just still want to review them because they're part of the greater whole, as it were. I'm going to review any DC deck building expansion that comes out, or any Marvel expansion that comes out, good or bad. I'm going to let you know. So I just love talking about these things, obviously. And hopefully this is helpful for the people who maybe aren't familiar with deck building, or people that just, well, I was going to say people that want to learn a little more, but this is so general, I'm not sure that it's helpful for people that want more, but we can discuss it down below in the comments. So yeah, I think that's it. The very general basics of deck building. Deck Building 101. Please like, share, and subscribe. I don't think I've said that yet. And please feel free to check out my other videos. I review a lot of books. That's how this whole thing started. So feel free to check those out. There's some movie reviews, and then there's some game reviews, and I think the majority of those are deck building. Check all that out, please. Let's talk about this stuff. So that's Deck Building 101. I'm Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.